The question of Alaric's identity and status is not as simple as it may seem. He acted at a time of rapid change in the social order of Europe, the full significance of which was not fully realized until later. It is therefore tempting to, retroactively, declare Alaric the first king, in the true medieval or, more accurately, modern sense of the term. The historian Jordan refers to him as Alaric the Great. The Gothic leader is also known as Alaric I, but who was he to his contemporaries? The difference between Fritigern, who defeated the Romans at Adrianople, and Alaric, who captured Rome, is actually the difference between a duke and a king, although both of their titles were elective. Fritigern could not make important decisions for the tribe on his own. When the Visigoths made peace with Theodosius, the treaty was approved by the governor and elders. Militarily, too, Fritigern was far from always able to order his tribesmen. For example, they persisted in sieges of fortresses, although they had neither experience nor siege weapons and suffered heavy losses. Alaric was undoubtedly endowed with far more power than Fritigern. In negotiations with the Romans, he acts as a representative of the tribe. Nevertheless, it is clear that Alaric was neither a prince, nor a duke, nor actually a king, as we now understand these terms. Alaric comes on the scene in the late summer of 391. At that time a large army of barbarians crossed the Balkans and moved southward. For the first time the agreement between the Eastern Roman Emperor Theodosius and the Gothic federates, in this case the Goths of Messia, was broken. The emperor personally moved against the enemy. On the Gebru's River, today's Maritsa, the barbarians caught the Romans by surprise and defeated them. The commander of imperial army Promotus with great difficulty managed to save the emperor himself. After that, Promote continued to fight with the barbarians Alaric, followed by not only the Visigoths, but also representatives of other barbarian peoples, and at the end of 391 died. The post of commander, and permanent vis-a-vis, Alaric, was taken by a truly worthy rival, the famous Roman general Stilichen, a Vandal by birth. His father held a high position in the Roman army, and Stilichen himself was a master of the army. He commanded all the military forces of the Western Empire. Emperor Theodosius married his favorite niece Serena to him. Over the course of 10 years, Stilichen gained the upper hand over Alaric 4 times. Each time the same thing happened. First Stilichen defeated Alaric and drove him into the cauldron, and then let him go. What is the reason for such, at first glance absurd, decisions? Considerations on this matter arose a lot. Suspected intrigue insidious prefect Praetorius Rufinus, the main political enemy Stilichen, and even treacherous indulgence barbarians himself commander. It was suggested that the Gothic leaders managed to impress the barbarians in the service of Rome, as their nobility, and their gold. To put it simply, it was about bribing imperial Germanic. In fact, Rome simply could not afford the luxury of destroying an army of imperial federates, however rebellious at the moment, and Alaric's Visigoths were at that point hardly the most Romanized of all barbarians. In the empire itself, there was a continuous process of strengthening the ties of the Romans with the imperial barbarians against the barbarians outside. It was a rather risky friendship against, and nothing else. The aliens within the empire had to be assimilated, finally converted into Romans. In 394 Emperor Theodosius had to suppress an attempt to usurp power in the west by a certain Eugenius, who was enthroned by the Frankish commander Arbogast in Gaul. It is asserted that the Danubian federates, i.e., Visigoths, put out then 20,000 soldiers, which made the backbone of the army of Theodosius. The battle took place on the river Frigida, Cold River, modern Vipic, a left tributary of the Isonzo. On the first day, Theodosius's vanguard, consisting of Gothic warriors, descended from the Birnbaum forest through a narrow mountain pass to the plain, where it was awaiting the troops of the army of the rebellious West under the command of Arbogastus. By the end of the first day's battle, half of the Goths were dead, and among the survivors it was already openly said that Theodosius had deliberately sent them forward to the most dangerous areas, in order to reduce their numbers and undermine the spirit of his dangerous friends. Worst of all, of course, was that Arbogast defeated the Gothic vanguard. The army of Theodosius retreated in disorder. The emperor withdrew into the mountains. The night passed uneasily. While Eugene celebrated, Arbogast sent a detachment with the order to occupy the mountain passages in the rear of Theodosius's army and surround it. Theodosius was saved by two circumstances. Firstly, some of Arbogast's commanders defected to the side of the Eastern Emperor, not wishing to serve the usurper. Naturally, for their loyalty to Theodosius, these people wanted to receive a good reward. Secondly, the next day, when the battle resumed, a storm was brewing. Clouds of dust flew in the face of the enemy. It is said that the wind was so strong that it tore the weapons out of the hands of the rebels. Then they realized that heaven was on Theodosius's side. Eugenius was executed. Arbogastus fled and committed suicide. Theodosius returned home in triumph. Everything promised a long, happy reign. And then the emperor suddenly died, whether from chronic illness or from overstrain caused by the military campaign. Power passed to the sons of Theodosius. In the east, to the elder, Arcadius; in the west, to the younger, Honorius. Young emperors have appointed guardians: Arcadius, Rufinus, Honorius, Stilichon. Rufinus and Stilichon hated each other and mutually intrigued. After the death of Theodosius, the alliance concluded between him and the Goths of Fritigern ceased to exist, as one of the parties disappeared. The surviving Goths from Theodosius's army, led by Alaric, left the Romans. The reason for this act is called unpaid or delayed wages. Food supplies ran out, and the Goths, advancing through Illyria and Dalmatia, engaged in plundering. In 10 weeks they reached Moesia, the places where they dwelt at that time. In mid-spring, Stilichon was ready to strike back and deal with the Goth rebellion. Alaric, meanwhile, together with the former federates, left the Danubian provinces and marched on Constantinople. Rufinus, prefect of the praetorium and guardian of the 17-year-old Arcadius, announced that he was taking it upon himself to negotiate with the barbarians. He traveled to Alaric's camp unguarded, dressed in barbarian garb. Apparently, his ties with the federates were long-standing. He had a good understanding of the Gothic character and managed to gain the respect of the Germans. In particular, it is known that Alaric did not plunder the possessions of Rufinus. In early summer, Rufinus concluded an agreement with Alaric, according to which a new territory for the Gothic federates in eastern Illyria was allocated, and Alaric probably received a high military post in the Roman army. Why did the Goths need new territory? Primarily because of the Hun threat. The Huns easily crossed the Danube, especially on ice, and began to threaten the edges inhabited by the Goths. While the Federate army fought for the interests of the empire, their families and homes were at risk. This is where one of the significant conflicts between the Eastern and Western empires for the time began. The part of the Illyrian prefecture that was given to Alaric and his men was within the Eastern Roman Empire. Stilichon demanded that these lands be given to the West. Allegedly, this was the dying wool of the late Emperor Theodosius. Rufinus was singing about the Eastern Empire, therefore, he did not want that in Illyria were the Germans. According to one version, Rufinus bribed Alaric and, informally, agreed with him that he would not go to Illyria, but to Thessaly. As a result, Alaric with his army appeared first in Macedonia, and then at the southern foothills of Olympus. Having penetrated into the valley of Larissa, the Goths fortified themselves at Wagenburg. Soon Stilichon arrived there with his troops. All summer of 395 both armies stood against each other and did nothing. The situation was paradoxical. Stilicho did not seek a battle, Alaric could not leave, and did not break through. At the same time, both armies were essentially Roman. There is a version put forward by the enemies of Stilicho, that he also had with Alaric some secret agreements. In any case, Rufinus saw in the actions of Stilicho a legal interference in the affairs of the Eastern Empire. Finally, came a categorical order on behalf of the Eastern Roman Emperor Arcadius, and Stilicho had to leave the Thessalian position. And then another event occurred that led to another termination of the treaty between Alaric and the empire. The prefect Rufinus was killed. As with the death of Theodosius, this death meant the termination of all obligations. The treaties were personal. Alaric and his army were once again rebels. The leader of the Gothic people was no longer the Illyrian commander-in-chief and loyal federate of the empire. He moved into Boeotia. Then it was Atticus' turn. Piraeus was captured. Athens paid off. They received Alaric with honor, entertained him with the achievements of Hellenic civilization, took him to the bath. After that Alaric plundered and burned Eleusinian temple of Demeter, captured Corinth, Argos, Sparta. Stilicho landed on the Peloponnesian coast of the Gulf of Corinth and after several skirmishes blocked Alaric's men on the plateau of Pholoia in Ellida. Disease broke out among the Germans, and the people suffered from thirst and hunger. It was expected that Stilicho will make a decisive blow, but it again did not happen. He concluded with Alaric some agreement and left. Alaricus waited for his departure, crossed over to Epirus and did a lot of mischief there. The consequence was the legalization of Alaric as Illyrian commander-in-chief. Apparently, this is what Stilicho wanted. Illyria. The most probable key to the riddle of inexplicable pliability of the commander. The Romans simply had no choice. Alaric had to be tamed, included in the state hierarchy, before he destroyed everything around him. Otherwise it would not have been possible to control the actual power of the Germanic prince on Roman territory. Who is Alaric? So, we said, prince, and that brings us back to the original question. Who was Alaric to his people? At different times, historians have claimed different things. Quite common is the view that sees Alaric I as a king, a model for the future formation of the Latin barbarian institution of military royalty. Others, on the contrary, believe that Alaric was not a king, in the proper sense of the word, like the kings of the later Visigoths of Toulouse. However, it is certain that at some point during the above-described wanderings the Visigoths adopted a new order of government. Military successes strengthened Alaric's initially high position, which he had due to his noble descent from the Balts. One way or another, but the royal power of Alaric does not come from the early tribal power of the chiefs by strengthening it. It is something qualitatively different. The king, the holder of unlimited and unrestricted powers, was the guarantor of the unity of the tribe. Earlier Gothic chieftains went to one side or the other, and at the same time waged wars among themselves. The king has no such opportunity. And no one from the Gothic people dares to suddenly switch to the side of the Romans for some personal reasons. The king recognizes such an act as a betrayal. The king unites his people when the tribe is in danger, and does not let it fall apart when victory is achieved. In Fritigern's time, as we remember, after the victory at Adrianople, the Goths were unable to capitalize on it and scattered throughout the empire. The presence of a king, at least theoretically, excluded such a possibility. The royal power of the Gothic leader on Roman territory differed from all types of royal power in barbarian lands. Its difference lies in the fact that this power, is linked to the position of supreme commander of the troops. Barbarian rics had not previously been given such high positions in the Roman army. Alaricus was the first to achieve the status of commander of a regular Roman army. At the same time, he was the first Germanic king of a new type.